On the morning of February 18, 1952, a 504-foot oil tanker called the SS Pendleton cracked in half during a nor'easter off Cape Cod, Massachusetts. 41 men were on board. The bow section, carrying the captain and 7 crew, tore away and drifted into the storm. The stern section, carrying 33 men, stayed afloat. The radio room was in the bow. The power supply was in the stern, which means the half of the ship with the radio had no electricity, and the half with the electricity had no radio. The Pendleton couldn't call for help. No distress signal, no SOS, nothing. For hours, the United States Coast Guard had no idea the ship had broken apart, because at that exact same moment, 20 miles away, another tanker was also splitting in two, and that one had a working radio. Let's back up. The Pendleton was a T2 tanker, a class of ship built during World War II to carry oil across the Atlantic. Around 530 of them were constructed between 1940 and 1945, slapped together at an incredible pace in Kaiser shipyards across the country. Some took less than 5 months to build. They were 501 feet long, welded together from prefabricated sections by workers who, in many cases, had never welded anything before in their lives. Housewives, teenagers, factory workers retrained in weeks. The ships were designed for speed of production, not longevity. They were supposed to win a war. Nobody expected them to last. But the war ended, and the T2 tankers didn't go away. They were sold to private shipping companies and kept hauling oil up and down the American coast for years. And they had a problem, a fatal one. The steel used in their construction had high sulfur content, which made it prone to something called brittle fracture. Above a certain temperature, steel is ductile. It bends, it flexes, it absorbs energy. Below that temperature, the same steel becomes brittle. It doesn't bend. It snaps, like glass. And the transition between those two states can happen over just a few degrees. In the cold waters of the North Atlantic in February, T2 tanker steel was right at that threshold. Here's what makes brittle fracture terrifying. In a riveted ship, a crack hits a joint between two overlapping plates and stops. The rivet holes and the gaps between plates act as natural crack arresters. But T2 tankers were welded. The hull was one continuous sheet of metal. A crack in a welded hull doesn't stop. It runs. It propagates at the speed of sound through steel, ripping across the entire cross-section of the ship in seconds. The SS Schenectady, another T2 tanker, cracked completely in half while sitting at its dock in Portland, Oregon, in January 1943. Not at sea, not in a storm, just sitting there. The air temperature dropped and the ship tore itself apart. Everyone knew about the problem. The Navy knew. The shipyards knew. After the Schenectady disaster, they mandated crack arresters, riveted straps welded across the hull to interrupt propagating fractures. 4 were required per ship. It helped. Ships stopped cracking in half quite as often, but the underlying metallurgy never changed. The steel was still brittle in cold water. The crack arresters were a bandage on a bullet wound. February 18, 1952. The nor'easter is a monster. Wind speeds exceeding 70 miles per hour. Waves 60 feet high. Visibility near zero in blinding snow. The Pendleton is heading south, loaded with kerosene and heating oil, 10 miles off the coast of Chatham, Massachusetts. At approximately 5:50 in the morning, the crew hears explosive cracking sounds. The ship lurches, the hull fractures amidships, and the vessel separates into 2 pieces. The bow, with Captain John Fitzgerald and 7 men, loses power immediately and drifts southeast, helpless. The stern, with 33 men and the engine still running, stays afloat. Chief Engineer Raymond Seibert takes command. He's not a captain, he's not a navigator, he's the guy who keeps the engine running. But the captain is gone, drifting away in the dark on a piece of metal that's sinking. So Seibert steps up. He organizes the crew, assigns duties, keeps the engine operational, keeps the lights on, keeps people alive. But he can't call for help. And nobody on shore knows they're out there. 20 miles to the southeast, the SS Fort Mercer, another T2 tanker, is fighting the same storm. At roughly the same time, her hull cracks too. She begins to split, but the Fort Mercer's radio is functional. The crew sends a distress call. The Coast Guard scrambles everything: 5 cutters, a Navy vessel, a PBY Catalina search aircraft. The entire rescue apparatus of the Cape Cod coast converges on the Fort Mercer. 38 of her 43 crew will eventually be saved. The Pendleton, meanwhile, is invisible. No signal, no flares visible through the blizzard. 33 men on a sinking stern section, and nobody is coming, because nobody knows. Hours pass. It's not until a Coast Guard radar operator notices something strange. There are too many large objects on the screen. The Fort Mercer broke in 2. That's 2 pieces, but radar is showing 4. Someone realizes the math. 2 ships broke in half, not 1. The Pendleton is out there, but by now, almost every available rescue vessel is committed to the Fort Mercer operation. The Chatham Lifeboat Station, a small outpost on Cape Cod, gets the call. Commanding Officer Daniel Clough tells Boatswain's Mate First Class Bernard Webber to assemble a crew and go find the Pendleton. Webber looks at the storm. The waves are taller than buildings. The wind is tearing the tops off them in horizontal sheets of spray. Visibility is measured in feet. He picks 3 volunteers: Andrew Fitzgerald, Richard Livesey, and Irvin Mask. Their vessel is CG-36500, a 36-foot wooden motorized lifeboat. It is designed to hold a maximum of 12 people. They launch into the storm. To reach open water, they have to cross the Chatham Bar, a shallow sandbar where the ocean floor rises and waves stack up into vertical walls of water. A massive wave picks up the CG-36500, throws it into the air, and flips it sideways. It lands, rights itself. Another wave hits. The windshield shatters, driving glass into Webber's face. The compass is destroyed. Their only navigational instrument is gone. They are now heading into a blizzard at night in 60-foot seas with no windshield, no compass, and no idea exactly where the Pendleton is. Webber almost turns back. He later admitted that. He thought about it. A moment of panic, of rational self-preservation. Then he kept going. They find the Pendleton by nearly crashing into it. Webber doesn't see the stern section until Fitzgerald hits the searchlight, and the beam catches a wall of black steel rising out of the water directly ahead. 50 more feet, and they would have collided. The stern is listing heavily, groaning and twisting in the waves, a 250-foot slab of broken ship with its deck lights still glowing. Webber maneuvers the 36-foot lifeboat alongside. The Pendleton's crew lowers a Jacob's ladder over the side. One by one, the men climb down. The ladder swings wildly in the wind, slamming them against the hull, then flinging them outward over the ocean. They have to time their jump to the rise and fall of the lifeboat below. Some land on the deck, some fall in the water and are hauled in, one after another. 12 men, 16 men, 20 men. The lifeboat is designed for 12. It's already double capacity, and still they come. 32 men make it down. The last man, a cook named George Myers, known as Tiny, had helped every other crew member onto the ladder before attempting the descent himself. He jumped. A wave slammed the CG-36500 into the Pendleton's hull and crushed him between the 2 vessels. He died instantly. He was the only man lost from the stern section. Webber now has 32 survivors, plus his crew of 4 on a 36-foot boat in a hurricane-force nor'easter with no compass. The boat is so overloaded that the deck is nearly underwater. mission control radios suggesting he rendezvous with a cutter and transfer the survivors at sea. Webber turns the radio off. He's not transferring anyone in these seas. They'd all die. He points the boat toward shore and navigates by instinct, by memory, by the feel of the swells. He finds the Chatham Harbour entrance in the dark, in the snow, in the storm, without instruments. The boat grinds onto the fish pier. The town of Chatham is waiting. They'd been listening on the radio. They pull the survivors ashore, wrap them in blankets, carry the ones who can't walk. The 8 men on the bow section were never rescued. The bow drifted, powerless, through the storm and eventually grounded on Pollock Rip Shoal. When it was boarded a week later, only 1 frozen body was found. The other 7, including Captain Fitzgerald, had been swept overboard. All 4 members of the CG 36500 crew received the Gold Life-Saving Medal, the Coast Guard's highest honour. Typically only the coxswain receives it. This time, all 4 did. It is still considered the greatest small boat rescue in Coast Guard history. And the T2 tankers? After 2 ships broke in half on the same day, the Coast Guard finally mandated that surviving T2s be reinforced with steel straps. But the underlying problem, brittle steel in cold water, was never truly fixed in those ships. More T2 tankers cracked in subsequent years. The Fort Mercer's stern was salvaged, towed to New York, fitted with a new bow, renamed the San Jacinto, and put back in service. 12 years later, she split in half again. The lesson of February 18th, 1952, isn't just about courage, though the courage is extraordinary. It's about a known engineering defect that was documented, studied, and never fully addressed because the ships were still making money. Almost 1,500 instances of significant brittle fracture were recorded in wartime welded ships. 19 Liberty ships broke in half without warning, and the shipping industry kept sailing them, because replacing a fleet is expensive, and catastrophe is always theoretical until it isn't. 4 men in a wooden boat the size of a living room, with no compass and no windshield, crossed a sandbar in 60-foot waves to pull 32 strangers off a broken ship that nobody knew was sinking. Bernie Webber said later that at some point, watching all those men climb down into his tiny boat, a thought came to him that brought him a strange kind of peace. Either we all live or we all die. And with that, he pointed the bow toward home. End of briefing.